I'm going to begin. It is just one moment after 7 o'clock, and while I'm continuing to admit attendees into tonight's program, I just want to briefly introduce myself and go over a few logistics for tonight's program regarding Zoom and this virtual platform. My name is Patty Smolin. I am serving as a tech assistant to the League of Women Voters of Palatine and the League of Women Voters of Glenview Glencoe for tonight's program, Housing Matters, the importance of stable, affordable housing for communities and what you can do. So tonight's program is being recorded and will be up and available on a YouTube platform in just a day or so. It is also closed caption enabled. And from our end, if you are familiar with Zoom, you know how to also turn that feature on from your side. If not, on the left side of this screen is some information. I'm sorry, on the right side of the screen is some information about how to obtain that. You would either highlight however your device is set up using closed caption or transcript. Anything along those lines. If you're having any difficulty, you are welcome to use the chat feature to send a chat to me directly. And again, the chat feature is on the left side. We are asking if you could please stay muted during tonight's presentation. And if you have a question for any of the presenters as we begin, you are most welcome to enter that question or comment in the chat. We suggest that you send it to everyone. You do have an option. You're welcome to send it to me directly or to a presenter. However, if you send it to everyone, they benefit from hearing that question, and we will pause periodically in between presenters to address that question. So without further ado, and I'm still continuing to welcome people to tonight's program, I'm going to move to the next slide, which is the agenda for this evening. And Vicki Martin, I'd like to turn this over to you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Vicki Martin, co-president of the League of Women Voters of the Palatine area. Along with our co-sponsors, the League of Women Voters of Glenview Glencoe, welcome to Housing Matters, the importance of stable, affordable housing for communities. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. Our members come from all walks of life and hold a wide range of political and social views. While we do take a position on important issues of the day, we never endorse a candidate or party. The League operates on the local, state, and national levels. Before the League takes a position on any issue, extensive research, study, and data collection takes place over a period of at least a year. The membership then votes on what position to take on that issue. This process and its result is taken very seriously by all of our members and has helped to solidify the reputation of the League as a source of accurate information. The League of Women Voters' position on affordable housing includes this statement. The League of Women Voters of the United States believes that one of the goals of social policy in the United States should be to promote self-sufficiency for individuals and families, and that the most effective social programs are those designed to prevent or reduce poverty. It is my honor to introduce the moderator for this evening, Kathy Cortez. Kathy is a director at Housing Opportunity Development Corporation, a developer of affordable housing in the Chicago suburbs, and has recently become involved in community advocacy for affordable housing projects around the Palatine area. She is the Fair and Affordable Housing Specialist on the League of Women Voters Illinois Issues and Advocacy Committee. And at the local level, Kathy is a member of the Palatine Area League and is chairman of the candidate forums. Please welcome Kathy Cortez.
Thanks, Vicki. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes putting some context around and giving a little bit of information before I turn over to who I'm sure will be much more interesting speakers for the evening. But I wanted to make sure that that as an audience, you had some context for this particular presentation. Often the presentations that I see or do are focused very much around the problem, why affordable housing is an issue, who it's impacting, so on and so forth. And I'm finding the biggest question that I get is, what can I do about it? You know, it's a huge problem. There is a wide spectrum of issues around affordable housing, and it can be very overwhelming. There are activities that happen at the national, state, and local levels that have a big impact on the affordable housing and the supply of affordable housing in our communities. And so I really wanted tonight to focus on what each of you might be able to take away, one thing that you might be able to do as an ordinary citizen out there to help start to work either on your own or through other community organizations to start to have an impact in helping to improve the housing supply. So with that, I'm just going to start with a few definitions and then I will hand over to our speakers. Give me just a second, I'll share my screen. Okay. So I want to start again with just sort of an understanding that there is a wide spectrum of housing supports. We're going to focus over in the area under permanent housing for the purposes of tonight's discussion. When we talk about affordable housing, a lot of times people go immediately to the building of multifamily housing. The building of multifamily housing is hugely important because there isn't enough of it, and getting more homes built is very important. But I think it's important also to recognize that that's not the only thing that we can have an impact on. And so we'll talk a little bit about a number of different things tonight. Under the area of homeless preventions and support, there are also lots and lots of things that are going on. Obviously, the best things that we can do to keep people in homes that they're already in is equally important to making sure they can actually find a home if they do find themselves without one. So let me just run through a couple of things. You're welcome to ask more questions about these toward the end if you'd like to, but under permanent housing, some of the items that you're going to hear talked about are public housing, for example, which I'll define in a moment. There are government subsidized programs. Those that you're most familiar with probably include housing choice vouchers. You've heard of LIHTC or the low income housing tax credits. Community development block grants are also government funded, and you'll hear in just a moment from Amy about how those often help to fund land trusts. Permanent supportive housing that's usually provided through a nonprofit organization. And then you also have other private and nonprofit support. So you have things like low interest loans that some organizations work to provide for individuals that want to purchase homes. And corporate grants and donations. I think it may have been Favorite Brands or something like that I read in the paper recently was donating something like $500,000 to try to refurb some affordable homes up in the northern suburbs. So there are all kinds of different programs that actually will help to improve the supply of housing. And before we get into talking about improving the supply, I'd like to just put a definition out there of when we talk about affordable housing, what do we mean? Very, very simply, it's not housing projects, right? It's basically housing that costs no more than 30% of a household's income, including their utilities. So that's a pretty wide range of opportunities because there's a really wide range of household incomes. And what we find though is in Illinois, nearly 30% of households are considered cost burdened. In other words, they're spending more than 30% of their income. And you can see that the lower income you are as you kind of go down the chart here, that the amount of cost burden that you bear, or the number of people that have a cost burden that they bear is extremely high. And once you're over about 75,000, and you'll see on the next slide some information about this, it gets to be much more manageable. And some people just prefer to live over their means, which is also fine too. But in the case of individuals who are lower earning, the vast majority of them simply can't afford the housing that's currently available. When you think about taking on your healthcare expenses, your insurance expenses for your car, and all of those kinds of things, maybe trying to put some food on the table, you know, having 60% of your income put a roof over your head is not acceptable. So when we talk about affordable housing, that's what we mean. You'll hear a lot of other terms that are also used in the affordable housing arena. And I thought it would be helpful to talk a little bit about that this evening, so that as the speakers are using some terms later on, you have some context for that. I mentioned public housing earlier. Public housing is housing that it's usually provided and run by the state or the local government, usually a housing authority. You know, the city of Chicago has one. Some of the larger suburbs also have housing authorities. This is housing that's usually meant for extremely low income families, normally 30% or less of the average median income for the area that they live in. And usually this is going to be rental property. Then you'll hear low income housing. Low income housing can probably be used across all three of those, all three of these definitions. But generally, and these numbers will change depending on what your source is. I used HUD for this. So you may, if you look on the internet and do your own searches, these numbers will move around a little bit. But generally, if individuals earn 50% or less of the area's median income, they would be considered eligible for low income housing. And I used Palatine as an example for qualification. If Palatine has a median income of around $90,000, that means that someone eligible for low income housing can't earn any more than about $45,000 a year. And they would need housing expenses of no more than $1,125, again, including their utilities. And that could be for either owned or rented units. Moderate income housing are homes that are available to people who earn between 50 and 80%. Sometimes you'll see 50 and 70% of the area median income. And now we're talking about people that are kind of between that $45,000 and $72,000 a year. And they can afford homes in the area of $1,100 to $1,800. Moderate income housing is especially important because it's typically the audience that gets ignored. In other words, they're not considered poor. But when you think about that average in there, that's sort of right around that 60% mark, that's a lot of people. That's recent graduates. That's people that are living on retirement incomes. That's individuals who are working in hospitals, your lab technicians, people that are doing your blood draws. It's all of the individuals that work in service industries and things of that nature. So this is a huge population that people generally don't talk about when they talk about low income. And it is, however, a part of the population. If you kind of take a look at that 1,100 to let's say 1,500, if you're earning 60,000, there's not a huge amount of housing out there at that rate. And so it's really each of these that we're trying to address when we talk about affordable housing. So why housing costs are such a problem? In my very typical way, I'm distilling this down to something that's a gross oversimplification, but the demand for housing that's affordable simply it exceeds the supply of what's affordable. And if you take a look at statistics that are for Illinois as a whole, if you're out there and you're looking for housing that's affordable for you, there are usually only 36 affordable units for every 100 low-income households. And so improving that will also improve the cost burden that people bear when they go to find housing, and then allow those families to have more disposable income to spend on both necessities and other things. Why affordable housing? Why the supply of affordable housing is so low is a very long story. I think if you attended the League of Women Voters issues forum last winter, we covered a lot there, and you hear a lot about this in the news. But at the end of the day, the housing market doesn't really lend itself commercially to low income housing. High-end developments are more profitable. That's what developers are going to build. Different communities have different zoning laws that place limits on how and where smaller affordable homes can be built. We'll talk about this in a bit as well. And then certainly misconceptions among our neighbors or local governments about affordable housing and the types of individuals that it's serving. And so what's the solution? Just as there is no one definition, problem, or set of circumstances, there really is no one solution. But fortunate for all of you tonight, I have some excellent speakers who are going to talk about some solutions, activities, and things that they have been doing in their local communities and in their regions. First, I'd like to introduce Amy Kaufman. Amy is the Director of Development and Community Relations at CEPA, or Community Partners for Affordable Housing. And she's going to talk a little bit about what her organization does. So Amy, take it away.
Good if I unmuted myself. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming on tonight and helping us as a community understand about affordable housing. When Kathy asked me to do this, she specifically said, could you please focus on solutions instead of redefining the problem, which I think is a great place to start. So my job tonight is to share with you a couple of things that CEPA does that we certainly see as solutions, and I hope you will too. So we are a nonprofit. This is who we are, Community Partners for Affordable Housing, for those of you who don't know. Just by way of a quick rundown and to completely support what Kathy just said, if you look at the picture on the right, this is one of our homeowners of a community land trust house and his family of 4 that's now a family of 5. He is a waiter at Walker Brothers. The picture next to that, Jackie and her daughter, they also own a community land trust house. Jackie and her partner were living separately because they couldn't afford housing, and they had to share Kayla's care, so they were running back and forth to each other's homes, and this house changed their lives so much that Jackie went back to school to become a nurse. So that's another great story. 2 over is a senior couple that were entering their senior years when they bought their land trust house. They say that the predicted expenses of home ownership and owning a home has been a game changer for them. And then all the way on the right is a single mom who was getting divorced and wanted to stay in the community. So that's a very broad range of who needs affordable housing. The pictures in the middle are other of our residents who benefited from home accessibility program, foreclosure assistance, things like that, which I will talk about in a minute. So we are, like I said, a nonprofit. This is our mission: to develop housing and provide services that empower individuals and families to secure and retain quality housing. We all know, I know we said we weren't going to talk about the why, but we really believe one of the mottos that, in addition to everybody should have a place to call home, is that affordable housing is access to safe, affordable housing is fundamental, that it's so pivotal to all of the other positive things that we can have in life, like kids' performance in school and jobs and careers and long-term stability. It's so foundational to those things that we really feel community investment in these kinds of issues is so important. So this is, as an organization, generally what we do. I'm going to talk about buying a house tonight. We also do rental. We also do repair grants. We also do foreclosure mediation. We also do rental and rental. So these are, as a whole, this is what we do. We are a full service housing nonprofit. For some of you who are confused, I'm going to go to the next slide. When CEPA was created, it was created by the city of Highland Park in 2003, and it was created as a community land trust. But in 2019, we merged with 2 other organizations. And when we did, we kept the SEPA name, but we added all of those other programs. So we have been a full service housing nonprofit since 2019, but tonight I'm going to talk about the Community Land Trust. So we are the first community land trust in Illinois. We have created somewhere in the area of 70 permanently affordable homes in Highland Park, Lake Forest, and Evanston. If you take nothing else away tonight about the Community Land Trust, the linchpin of the Community Land Trust is that each home is permanently affordable, and I'm going to explain how we do that in a moment. So like I said,
I'm so sorry, we do have a question that I think is pertinent to before you
Okay.
begin.
Shoot.
One of our attendees is asking for clarification. What is a land trust house?
Okay,
So
if you
it's
give
not-
me about 3 minutes, I'm going to get to why we call it a land trust.
Thank you.
Hang in there for just a couple of minutes, and I promise we will get there. So SEPA was created, like I said, in 2003 by the city of Highland Park. The program we're talking about tonight is the Community Land Trust, which was created to help bridge the gap between the high cost of housing and the incomes of regular working people. And originally the thought was teachers and policemen and firemen and healthcare workers, retail staff. The truth is, I've been doing this a while now, as some of you who I recognize on here know, that everybody comes to affordable housing for a different reason. Sometimes it's low wages. Sometimes it's because they've had a change of circumstances, like a divorce or a death in the family. Sometimes you're home taking care of a sick kid and you can't work anymore, or you have to reduce your hours. So the profile of who needs affordable housing is vast, and it's important to remember that because people come to the need for affordable housing for such a variety of reasons. All of these are land trust houses, just to give you an idea, and land trust residents. This one at the bottom, the blue one, is in Lake Forest. These 3 at the top are in Highland Park. And this is what a land trust is, and this is how a land trust works. So this is what we do. SEPA goes out and buys a house on the open market, just like you would. Once in a while, somebody donates a home, and sometimes we do a larger development, but generally we go out and we buy a home on the open market. We give that home as green a rehab as possible, and following that rehab, we sell that home at an affordable price to a household that qualifies based on income and other program rules. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead for a second. Okay, so when I say based on income, here is an income chart. So for the houses that we buy and that we develop, if you look at the 80% mark that have any kind of federal funding in them, that is the maximum household income per household size that a household could have and qualify for an affordable home. So that gives you a sense of who your target audience is. Okay, so we go out, we develop these homes, and then let's say we sell a home for $180,000, but it cost us about $350,000 or $400,000 to develop. So the question is, where does that money come from? How are we able to do that? Well, the way we are able to do that is when somebody buys a home from us, a community land trust home, they buy the house or the improvements, and we, the land trust, maintain ownership of the land underneath. That is where the land trust name comes from. We hold that land in trust. Okay, and it doesn't change the experience of home ownership. All it does is guarantees that whoever buys that house at a reduced price is going to sell it at a reduced price to another qualified household. Okay, so that is what the meaning of land trust is. It means that there's a one-time investment, one-time grant funding investment in developing this house that Amy's going to buy first, and Kathy's going to buy second, and Monica's going to buy third, and so on. So that one-time subsidy is leveraged for household after household after household. The household that's living in the home at the time rents the land, leases the land from us for $25 a month for as long as they're in the house. They just send us a payment for $25 a month. That's the consideration for the contract. And then let's say I bought a land trust house, and 10 years later, I decided my circumstances had changed. I wanted a bigger house. It was time for me to sell my home. SEPA would help me sell my house to another low-income household. Okay, so that's how the land trust works. And that's why we are able to keep the price affordable from person after person. SEPA will determine what the maximum resale price is using a resale formula. That resale formula is incorporated into this ground lease. Oops. Into this ground lease. And so you know what it is, you know how the formula is going to work before you buy your house. But if you bought your house at $180,000, you're going to sell it for somewhere around that. You're not going to capture all of the appreciation, nor are you going to be responsible for a lot of depreciation if the market goes down. It's a very low risk proposition, but people build wealth through homeownership by paying down their mortgage. So if they buy their house for 180 and then it comes time 10 years later and they sell it for 185, but they only have $150,000 left on their mortgage, that's where the wealth building comes from. And it's a very, very successful model of helping people build wealth in a very low risk way. Okay, I'm going to show you briefly the resale formula. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but the resale formula is designed to allow the homeowner to capture a small share of the appreciation, capture what they pay down on their loan, and keep the price affordable for the next person. So this is one way that communities can participate in affordable housing, because we go out into the community. Often we buy blighted homes that nobody else wants for good reason. It expands our mission. We're also then able to help the neighborhood, help the community. We're developing a permanently affordable asset for the community. Okay, and then as Kathy mentioned, at times we use CDBG, but more often there's a source of federal funds called home funds. We put those home funds together with a few other sources, usually a municipal matching fund, and that's the difference between our development cost and what we're selling the house for. And that's how we're able to do that. So each of these CLT homes, we always say it's a win-win-win. It's a win for the first buyer. It's a win for the community because you've created a permanently affordable asset, and it's a win for the next buyer. And in this era where we're discussing DEI and wealth building and providing access, the CLT is an extremely effective model. I see there's a couple of questions. Did the person who asked about what a land trust house is get their question answered?
This is Patty, Amy, and I do
Yeah.
believe you did answer that question. We do have 3 others if you would like.
Sure.
I
Sure.
think they are relevant to what we're discussing. Who holds the mortgage and what interest is charged is the first question.
So the homeowner owns the mortgage, has the mortgage. We have a $10 mortgage on the property that is recorded. There's a couple of instruments that are recorded that prevent the homeowner from selling their home on the open market. So what you really don't want is for somebody to buy it from you for 180 today and sell it for $300,000 tomorrow. And that can't happen because we have grant funds in it. So we do have some mechanisms where we also record some instruments, but the mortgage, the buyer gets a mortgage with a bank. The house is affordable, but it's not free. They have to qualify for a mortgage. You have to meet debt to income ratios. There's a 3.5% down payment generally. We require our residents at the outset to do a 30-year fixed. The interest rates the one that closed yesterday was 2.99. So the interest rate really depends on the particular profile of the buyer, but they're reflective of what today's interest rates are. Okay.
The question, Amy, is how are the real estate taxes determined?
That's a great question. So unfortunately for SEPA, when we own the home, so when we buy the home, we then hold it for a while we're fixing it up. When we own the home, we pay market rate taxes. But the minute that we sell it to the buyer who qualifies, the taxes adjust to reflect I say the purchase price, but the reason it's reflecting the purchase price is because the resale value of that house is restricted. So property taxes are based on what the value of your house is, what your resale value is, and land trust houses are restricted. So the taxes are adjusted to reflect the purchase price. So for instance, the house that closed yesterday at 200, that buyer, when the taxes kick in starting October 2021, they will reflect what anybody else would pay in their township and in their county for a $200,000 house, even though the house assessed for $375,000. Okay, I want to make a really important point here. Here, see this slide where it says, how do those interested, I can't see because it's blocked, qualify for an affordable CLT home. So SEPA does very rigorous qualifications. We do have grant funds in these houses. We take our responsibility to treat everybody the same very seriously. Our funders take it very seriously. And people also often ask me, how do we pick people? We do not pick people, we qualify people. Okay, you're either qualified or you're not. There's no special circumstances, there's no hardship measure, there's no anything like that. Those would be awful violations of fair housing, but people do have this sense it is all about getting qualified. Okay, if somebody really wants to participate in this program, and we will help people get qualified. We hold hands, we will help people get over the line. It is hard for some people. You have to have enough, but not too much income. You can't really be carrying that much debt because there's debt to income ratios. And it can be difficult, but we'll help as much as we can. If somebody comes to us who's really not prepared, all those other programs that I mentioned to you, we have an extremely robust counseling department at SEPA. And so we direct people into housing counseling to help them move along the path to homeownership. Everybody who buys a SEPA CLT house is literally required to take home buyer education. Home buyer education reduces foreclosures by 30%. And we actually have an extremely low foreclosure rate, as do land trusts around the country. That is not, I can't take credit. We can't take credit for that. That's true across the country. I'm convinced that part of that reason is that we vet our applicants very carefully, in the sense of we make sure that they have enough but not too much income, and the bank does as well. And they do their part, and they are looking at it for a completely different kind of risk. We don't get involved in credit reports, the bank does. So they have to have be pre-qualified by the bank and have to be qualified by us in order to purchase a home. Okay.
Yeah, a few more questions. So tell me
Yep.
if you want to continue taking them.
Sure.
or-
Shoot. Yep. Go ahead.
Do neighbors know that a home is a land trust, or does that remain confidential?
Well, we certainly don't like blare it from the rooftops, but we also don't go out of our way to make it completely secret. It's as confidential as you want it to be. Unless somebody went looking, there would really be no reason for a neighbor to know. It's really not been an issue in the communities we work in, to tell you the truth. Most of the houses that we have rehabbed, the neighbors are so happy that those homes are getting a rehab and no longer vacant and blighted, that they literally applaud us when our trucks pull up and our contractors get out. So it's just not, I know that people fear that that's going to be a problem, and maybe in the communities we've worked in, it's kind of baked in the cake at this point, but it's been a long time since we've had issues with neighbors. And if we did, we would do just what I'm doing tonight. We would go and meet with people and explain what we're doing and what the criteria is, and that goes a long way to dissipating any concerns.
Another question, who quote unquote hires you? Is it the city, and are you in many communities?
SEPA as a larger organization is in many, many communities. The community land trust right now is only working in Highland Park, Evanston, and Lake Forest. We're about to start partnering with Northbrook on inclusionary housing, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, which may lead to some land trust activities. There may be some land trust activities in some other communities coming up. We're going to do some land trust work in Wilmette over the next 4 years, which is really exciting. So those are the communities that we're in right now. Lots of communities are thinking about it. The who hires us is we go out and we secure the funding. We hire us basically, but we have to go and put the funding together. Like we go, let's take Highland Park because they're the most robustly involved with the land trust. We decide, we work with the city staff there and decide, okay, how many units is SEPA going to do this year? How much money do they have to contribute? We figure out how we can leverage those funds. We go to Lake County and put the funding package together, and that's how we get our funding done. But nobody literally goes out and nobody hires us as a contractor. We go out and develop a funding package. We go to the municipality and ask for some money. The county gives us a certain amount of money, and we put all that together to fund our development activities.
More questions?
Yep.
Home improvements.
Great question.
How do they factor in?
So you can improve your house, and we really encourage people to improve their house to the extent that they want to, because they're going to live there and they can afford it and they really want to. The way the resale formula works, you're not going to get your money back dollar for dollar. There's a very limited range of improvements that will give you a credit on resale for. They're structural, like your roof, if you replace your roof, and that credit depreciates over time. We have a couple of programs that help support our homeowners with critical home repairs. One is a matching program with a local bank that has been incredibly successful. Our residents save a certain amount of money and the bank matches it. We hold the match money for their critical home repairs, and when they need it, they come to us, and they can spend that down. And then the other one is we have a microloan fund, and so we will make small loans to people to help with the cost of, I mean, if you have an underground sewer break, you know, that can be many thousands of dollars. That's kind of a good example. We will help somebody pay for that at extremely low interest, like 1%, I think it's 1.5%. And we'll stretch out the payments as far as they need to go to give somebody the support that they need. But we expect people to pay it back because it is a revolving loan fund, and we'd like to make the loan to the next person. So those are very effective ways that have really developed over the years. That's based on experience. When those are things that came after we started, that we realized, okay, we needed mechanisms to do these, and we've added those things along the way, and they've been very successful. Our residents are very successful at homeownership generally.
One more question, because I know you have more content in another 5 minutes. Is there special zoning for CLTs, or can you purchase whatever properties you like?
Yes, we can purchase whatever properties we like.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, let's see. All right, I'm going. So Kathy sort of went through this. Who lives in CLT houses, or who lives in inclusionary housing, which I'm going to talk in a moment. Exactly what Kathy said. Low and moderate income earners, people who've experienced a change in life circumstances, seniors who are getting forced out of the community because now they're on a fixed income, young adults who can't come back, persons with disabilities. It goes on and on. I'm telling you, there's a lot of reasons that people need affordable housing. This is the resale formula. I'm going to skip that because we're short on time, but suffice it to say that there's a very specific formula that when somebody goes to sell their house, that the price is determined by that formula. Okay, let me skip to include. So the second solution I wanted to touch on briefly was inclusionary housing. This is another SEPA specialty. We work with municipalities to help them develop inclusionary housing ordinances. Inclusionary housing ordinances are exactly the opposite of exclusionary, which Kathy also touched on, which means that when there's a new development, a certain number or certain percentage of units in that new development are set aside to be sold or rented at an affordable price. And it targets a range of income levels generally. There's offsets for the developer so that they get increased number of units when they comply with the ordinance. Sometimes there's fees in lieu that can be worked with in addition to units. It's also a very successful program. It's created many, many units, especially rental units in Highland Park, and also in Evanston. We had a lot in Evanston, and Northbrook just passed an inclusionary housing ordinance, and we're just getting going there. SEPA is their nonprofit partner. We draft the policies and procedures, and we basically administer it from a qualification end. So IHOs, inclusionary housing ordinances, typically target below 50, below 80, and below 100% of area median income. If it's a for sale unit, it can go all the way up to 120 generally. Affordable units in big developments generally mirror market rate units. There are some differences that are generally allowed, but they're supposed to be scattered through the development. They're not supposed to be set off by themselves. They're supposed to be similar in size. They're supposed to be able to take advantage of all the amenities in the building. SEPA does the income qualification, like I said, but the property managers actually make the decision themselves who to lease to. Again, we don't do the credit checks. So people get referred by us to the property manager. We say they're program eligible, and the property managers take it from there. This works extremely well with the community land trust for a couple of reasons. When the market is hot, there's a lot of big developments going on. The big developments wind up creating affordable units through inclusionary housing. When the market is hot, it's very hard for the CLT to get as much value for the properties that we want to buy. So that is it's a good seesaw effect. The other effect is that sometimes there's a funding mechanism that's created through an inclusionary housing ordinance, which eventually will fund community land trust activities. So they actually work very well together. This is an example. These are a couple of the new buildings. This is the glossies that the developers put out. These are not pictures we took ourselves, but it just gives you an idea. This is the new building that went up in Highland Park. There's 17 affordable units in there. This was one of the first. This was a rental building in Highland Park. There's 5 units in there. These are the 2 buildings that went up last year in Evanston. This is a 55 plus. Avador is a 55 plus building. Albion is just a regular apartment building, or almost completely fully leased. By the affordable units are almost completely fully leased. This is for those of you who live in Highland Park, probably not many of you do. This is the one that just went up in Ravinia. There's 5 units in there. And this is one that's going to have condos in it off to the right where it says 1 Highland Park. It's going to have 3 inclusionary condos in there. This was the first affordable inclusionary housing in Highland Park, inclusionary. And you can see that on the left, there are dormers, and on their right, there are not. That's an okay distinction to make. Most developers don't do that today. But it works even in inclusionary housing, works in almost every context. And that's it.
Can you do me a favor? And I know that you were trying to buzz through that pretty quickly.
Sorry. Yeah.
But can you just select an example?
Sure.
And could just kind of walk us through, developer comes in, they want to do something. What happens next when we talk about trying to get inclusionary or get homes in a building that include lower income people?
So there's communities that have inclusionary housing ordinances and communities that don't. So for let's take one that does have an inclusionary housing ordinance. The developer has to have their affordable housing plan incorporated into their proposal to the city, and it goes through the plan commission and the housing commission just like anything else would, and it receives approval along with the developer agreement and the site plan. For communities that do not have an affordable housing ordinance, it's much more difficult because there's nothing forcing a developer to put affordable units on site. Some municipalities ask developers to come up with something to include in their new building. That's what happened in Wilmette. And we got a very large donation from the builder in Wilmette that's going to fund 14 units over, there's some other sources of funds too, but it's going to fund 14 units there over 4 years. And there's no inclusionary housing ordinance there, but that's kind of an outlier. It's really about having an inclusionary housing ordinance because people get so mad when developers don't include units on site, but if you don't have an inclusionary housing ordinance, it's very difficult to force a developer to do that. So, those are the 2 ways. If you have the ordinance, there's a very specific process. The developer approaches the municipality asks for, some sort of preliminary plan, and that plan has to include their affordable housing proposal. And if you don't have an ordinance, then it's really up to the municipality to say, we'd really like to see you do something about affordable housing, but developers don't have to.
So safe to say, Amy, that the purpose behind the zoning ordinance that you're referring to is that rather than having sort of low income or affordable housing over on the other side of town en masse somewhere, that it's more integrated in with the rest of the community, and individuals who are on the lower end of the spectrum can enjoy all the things that the rest of the more wealthy end of the community enjoys, correct?
Yes, but it is just a tool in the toolbox, right? It's not, there are people who really want to be near town, and inclusionary housing is a fabulous way. A lot of these large rental buildings are right in the center of town. They want to be close to transportation. SEPA can't build 17 units for, we can't do, it's not a 1-for-1 exchange. And it does provide those kinds of opportunities, but it is a tool in the toolbox because it is not one size fits all. Some people want that single family home. Some people are, really happy to downsize to a 2-bedroom apartment. It really depends on the individual circumstances, but it is a key component for how to create affordable units in communities that we consider high opportunity particularly. So that is, that's what I have. So Patty, are there any more questions, or I'm ready to move on?
I think we are current with questions. Oh, I'm sorry, one more just came in. So if this is Abadar is a senior housing, would these would be seniors?
Abador is 55 plus.
55 plus, okay. Not a question, but a compliment from one attendee that just said this was excellent, and I couldn't agree more.
Thank you. Happy to do it.
Million, Amy. We're going to move on to the next two presenters. I am pleased to have a couple of folks with us from an organization called Action Ridge Network. Kristin Berg is a fellow league member with Park Ridge. She's also the president of Housing Opportunity Development Corporation on their board. And joining her is Nan Parson, I'm sorry. And Nan, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are the founder of Action Ridge, correct?
That's correct. Co-founder.
Co-founder.
Yeah.
And so thank you both so much for joining. This next part of the presentation is going to focus a little bit less on the nuts and bolts of the solutions themselves and more on the approach for how you can take action in your community to further a lot of interests, but affordable housing in particular. So with that, Kristin, I'll go ahead and turn over to you.
Okay. Well, this is Nan, actually.
Go right ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Because Kristin and I made a plan about how we're going to do this. And our first idea was to explain a little bit about Action Ridge, how it came to be, what it is really. And since I was one of the co-founders, I was there from the very beginning, and then Kristin joined a little bit later. But Action Ridge is we're not a 501c3 or 4. We're not an agency that creates affordable housing. We are a grassroots organization that has a board. We're working on a structure actually, and 5 committees, which the leaders of those committees are focusing on areas of interest that they particularly have. And Kristin and I are particularly interested in affordable housing. So that's why we're here tonight. Action Ridge was formed in 2017 when a group of us from Park Ridge went on the bus to the Women's March. So you might have some idea what happened there. And we became very energized and inspired by that march. And those of us who were on this bus together said, when we get home, let's get together and get to know each other a little more. Some of us, we'd never met each other actually, and see how we can go forward with this enthusiasm that we had on those dates in January of 2017. And kind of amazingly, we put out the word, and 15 people showed up at a little meeting and quickly developed our mission statement, which you can see on the screen here, I think, that we promote the principles of democracy, inclusion, respect, equity, and the health of our planet. And truth matters. At that time we were, and still are, but we were really focused on the importance of knowing the facts about an issue and communicating those facts. So that we decided that we would have meetings once a month where we would have speakers and would begin to educate ourselves and others about the issues that we felt were important. And we began to spread the word that we were doing this, and set up a Facebook page and eventually a website, which we're going to show you some things about that website in a little bit. And over time, through social media and some interviews with the newspapers, with our 2 local papers, we developed a membership, well, kind of a membership, I guess we'd say, our Facebook group. So that that's how we got started. And amazingly and kind of inspiringly, we've grown. And I think, Kristin, did you want to show our website at this point? So we had it just to show you a little bit of how we are advertising ourselves. through
For
social
some
media.
reason, I'm having technical difficulties here, and I was, all I could see is Kathy Cortez's screen. I'm not
Yeah.
sure why.
Yeah, that's what I saw too. Well, we saw the
This is Patty. I was waiting for Kristin to put the screen up, but I'll go back and I'll retrieve it again for you. If you would like, you can just tell me what you would like to navigate to. Give me just a moment.
Okay, yeah, I can't really see anything.
there it is.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So if you can see it, that's great. I really didn't want to talk that much about the website, except to notice that we do have, different areas. We have areas where we can talk about the meetings and agendas for the various meetings. We have success stories. We have our areas of interest. And I think that's one thing about Action Ridge. It's not just about affordable housing. It's also about social justice, civil rights, criminal justice, environment. We have a lot of different issues, policing, healthcare, voting, where we work along with the League of Voters. We register voters in Action Ridge. And so it's a group that, housing is one of the interests, but we've really partnered with people that are interested in a lot of different things.
Mhm. Okay. So I think one of the interesting things that's happened is that, now you can kind of see what's on our website. That's happened over the years is that we've developed relationships with other people in the community who are also interested in progressive issues. And Kristin mentioned the League of Women Voters. And interestingly, some of the same members that are people that are members of Action Ridge are also members of League of Women Voters, like Kristin and myself. And we also are partner with Go Green Park Ridge, which I'm very strongly involved with, which is an environmental group, obviously. And the Ministerial Association is involved, the ministers in town are involved in Action Ridge, several of them, especially recently, the pastor of the Methodist Church in Park Ridge has expressed a great interest in affordable housing, and we've been working with him to help educate his congregation on that subject. We also are involved with other activists like Jacques Charlier. I don't know if you know him, Jack Charlier. He says, I call him Jacques Charlier, who is the executive director of Treatment Alternatives for Safe Communities. And we're also involved with Neighbors for Affordable Housing on the northwest side of Chicago, which is headed up by Michael Rabbitt. And we have developed a relationship, particularly with District 207 and with the principals of Maine East and Maine South, most particularly with Maine South, who they are working very hard there to develop their DEI program, their diversity, equity, and inclusion program to support all the students in their high school. And we've been attending meetings to lend our support to their efforts. And recently we've connected up with the Center of Concern, which is based in Des Plaines, but does a lot of work in Park Ridge, mostly for senior citizens. And this is our newsletter. And then also with Avenues for Independence, which provides housing and services for individuals with disabilities. And the way we've really promoted affordable housing in Park Ridge is to raise awareness with the city council and with the Planning and Zoning Commission. Kristin and I have met with, we have 2 more aldermen to go, but we've met with every alderman, and we'll probably meet with them again to talk about the importance of affordable housing. We've met with a city planning staff, and we'll meet, and recently met with the new hire for who's going to be is the senior planner, and he came from Highland Park, so we're kind of excited about that because we hope that he will, well, we know that he will be supportive of the kinds of housing programs in Park Ridge that we've been wanting Park Ridge to adopt, like inclusionary zoning. We're very far from that. We would like to just get Park Ridge to create a housing plan, and have offered to help with that.
That's a good start, a housing plan.
Yeah, because we have not complied with the Affordable Housing Planning and Appeals Act, and we have been pushing Park Ridge to do that. And now that it's got a little more teeth, we're hoping that that will come to pass. So we have met with the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission and with the city manager to talk about what we feel is important in the affordable housing arena. So I guess we could just say that we have raised awareness in Park Ridge over these many years that I've been working on this. And I think, and Kristin's going to talk a little bit more about how specifically we've been doing that and why right now this is a very important issue to be pushing in Park Ridge. And we're also collaborating with the Justice Project. Well, some of you know about that. It's a activist group that really works to coordinate and help communities, 8 communities, I believe at this time, to collaborate on justice issues. And it's headed up by Gail Schechter. And we're a friend of Gail Schechter's for a long time. And we're happy to be working with her and with that group of individuals who originally planned the Justice Project on the green and Wilmette Green in honoring the anniversary of Martin Luther King's visit to the green. That's how they started. And they're still, as they say, the march continues. So we're working with them. Okay, so Kristin's going to talk a little bit about what Action Ridge actually has been doing in the affordable housing arena.
Okay. What we started out doing was making presentations. Nan and I put a presentation together, and we gave it to the entire group of Action Ridge, as well as to some of the other local groups and in some of the local churches. So we just started getting the word out. And again, as Nan said, when Action Ridge started, it was 10 to 15 people meeting in a room. Now the meetings have, maybe 30, 40 people. And there's an email and Facebook list of about 400 to 500 people. So it's really just kind of grown, it's grown legs all of its own, so to speak. So we also, we give out information, and as in our name, we say calls to action. And action items could be anything from filing witness slips for local legislation. It could be calling a local, state, or federal congressional representative, or your state representatives to advocate for certain bills. So there's a lot of different, types of actions that you can do. As Nan said, we started attending the planning and zoning and city council meetings And one of the spurs to that was in 2019, Park Ridge decided to update its comprehensive plan. The plan, current plan is from 1996, so in sore need of updating. And as you might guess, there is absolutely no mention of affordable housing in the plan, in the housing chapter or anywhere else, I'm sure. So we saw that as an opportunity, as Nan said, to raise awareness and to start talking about affordable housing and to try to get a mention of affordable housing into our plan. So we did this again by attending meetings, speaking up, talking about it, not only in Action Ridge, but in other groups. And we networked with other people, other groups. And in 2020, we really started a letter writing campaign. We had put out a call to action with Action Ridge saying, look, we need people to come to these planning and zoning meetings, to come to the city council meetings. Of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so we're talking virtually, and we encouraged also either to make a public comment in the meeting, or at least to send an email with their comment in support of, a housing policy that would, support affordable housing, creating new affordable housing in some of the ways that Amy and Kathy talked about, also preserving some of the affordable housing we have. We have some smaller homes in Park Ridge. The community was built, we're next to O'Hare. There was a lot of workforce housing built here when the airport was being constructed. A lot of it has been torn down and huge mansions put up instead. So we'd like to make sure we have some tools to preserve the housing we do have. Well, that what happened is when all of these people wrote letters and started making comments, some of the folks in the Planning and Zoning Commission, not all, but the chair and a few others and some select aldermen really, I think, were hoping that they could just push affordable housing back under the rug. Why do we have to talk about it in Park Ridge? Why do we have to deal with this? We're fine as we are. But with all of the noise we started making in those letters, we were heard. We were heard. And what happened was, instead of trying to just write a policy and write a comprehensive plan that just eliminated all these ideas, it actually got put on pause. And the comprehensive plan, which is written by staff and our planning and zoning department, started to concentrate on land use. And we kept attending those meetings. We kept talking about land use. And I will say, I'd noticed that as they were talking about it, the commissioners, affordable housing came into the conversation more often than they would have thought. And so again, you don't think that if you raise these issues, if you talk to people and you keep talking about it, that you're not heard, because you are heard. And again, we were successful in at least getting the topic talked about.
Kristin, can you do me a favor and talk a little bit about what was the nature of the letters that were sent? And then your approach once you started to attend Plan Commission, for example, were you asking for space on the agenda for a specific issue? Maybe provide a little bit of understanding on the details of what y'all were doing.
Well, no, we weren't really asking to be on the agenda, but as housing policy was being discussed, take an example, accessory dwelling units. There were a lot on the city council and some in the commission that were against, even really talking much about accessory dwelling units and allowing them even in some parts of the city. So, we would speak up. There would be times that there would call for public comment there during a meeting. If they're talking about an issue, they will ask for public comment, and at those promptings, we would make comments. And we would ask, basically when we asked people to write letters, it was, support what you're in support of, or talk about your personal story. And some people talked, for example, we'll go back to ADUs, and they said, listen, I have my parents that are living with me, and it would really be advantageous if we could build, another unit either on our property or within our home, to have a separate unit for them, but still have them be with us. Maybe it's children that they wanted in the same property. Maybe it's a disabled member of the family, who knows? Or people just saying, look, I live in Park Ridge, but I'm working 3 jobs and I'm really struggling. I'd like to stay here. My family's here. My friends are here. My church is here. I want to stay here, but I no longer able to afford to live here. Can't we have some more diversity, in housing? So whatever, again, the more personal the letters, I think the better they are. There was a group at a booth at a kind of a fair during the summer that provided some language, and we've provided some language through Action Ridge too. But if people write letters all using the same language, then you're accused of just sending in form letters, and those are too easily dismissed. So I really recommend you write, personal letters, if you can. And it can be a very contentious issue. It's very contentious here in Park Ridge. In fact, we actually lost our planning director and our senior planner last spring. And it was, we believe, over these affordable housing issues. There was some kind of behind the scenes negotiations that were going on between the chair of our Planning and Zoning Commission and a few of the aldermen. And those communications were exposed through a Freedom of Information Act request. It got really very, there was a lot that was going on here. I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but don't underestimate the kind of contention that is out there. But we all have voices. You have a voice as well as somebody else has a voice. And again, if you can unite and get more people and keep connecting with people and encourage people to show up. We decided to form our committee because we really wanted to concentrate, and we had some goals, get some goals around what is it we're exactly trying to accomplish. We want to make some specific recommendations for the comprehensive plan. And we'd like to see Park Ridge now finally submit a housing plan to the state. So those are the things that we're working on. But after this big brouhaha, and we lost 2 of the planners, Nan came up with a wonderful idea, and I'm going to let you talk about the public statement that you wrote, Nan, for the council.
Okay. Yeah, we wanted to make it clear that what Action Ridge and quite a few citizens of Park Ridge really want is for the council to keep in mind whenever they are considering policy, zoning issues, or any actions that the council or the commission takes, that they keep in mind the inclusion, respect, and equity that Action Ridge has in our mission statement. And so I made a public comment to that effect. We feel that it's important to kind of keep, as Michelle said, when they go low, we go high, and so that statement was a way of saying we are not going to fight in the trenches, so to speak, but we're going to go above the fray and expect our representatives to do that as well, because we felt that is not what was happening when we asked for this freedom of this FOIA request, revealed some actions which were not open and transparent. And so I made that statement. And at that time also, I wanted to tell you that a young woman in our community ran for alderman, and the issue of affordable housing came up during the campaign. And there was her opponent used scare tactics in their ward where they were both running to sort of frighten residents into thinking that she would advocate for tearing down their houses and building affordable housing on their property. And they wrote letters. They were really scared. And so that was another way in which we thought people were using tactics which were not healthy and helpful. And that's another reason why I made that public comment to the city council. We were very proud of this young woman because of her and her hard work and her taking the high road. The issues came out in sort of you think these things only happen in Chicago politics, they happen in suburbs too. And I think we gained more people were interested in what we were doing because of that.
Well, tell them
fight
how
that-
many people signed on to that public comment.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, yes, the public statement was when it was read into the city council over the weekend, but you have to do it when they're having the meeting. So sometimes you can't plan really far ahead because you don't really know when they're going to meet. So we started out on Friday to get signatures to that public comment, and we got about 60. And then over the weekend, just over the weekend, we ended up with 99, about 100 people, more than 100, I think there were actually in the end, who signed on to that, who agreed that they wanted their city to, take into consideration just issues having to do with justice and equity. So, and we're friends with the two lead writers for the journal topics and for the Herald Advocate. And so we call them every time we're going to do something and see if they'll write up a little piece, and they often do. So that's really helpful. And that was in the paper too. So that helped. So that's one thing that we did. And we're nonpartisan, so we do not support candidates. I got to be clear, we did not support this young woman who was running for alderman, but we just let people know that she was out there and that she was, and as individuals, we can work for any candidate that we want to as individuals. We just do not endorse candidates. Action Ridge, like the League of Women Voters, does not endorse candidates. So we didn't actually.
And
Patty, can I just interject something quickly?
Sure.
Everything that Kristin and Nan just said, in some ways we should have been flipped, because all of those things in the communities that we work in successfully now, those things happened before we got to the point where we're a CLT and inclusionary ordinance. All of that has to happen. You have to have a local champion. You have to have grassroots efforts. You have to have people who are really sort of energizing your agenda and bringing people together to support. I completely agree about people showing up at meetings. For whatever reason, it has a big effect on the people who are making decisions. And you do need some people to really, have your eye on it. And that's how you get to the point where you can implement those programs. It's not always the case, but it's often the case.
Yeah.
well, and we've also tried to help, we've offered our assistance as well to planning and zoning, to council. We had Sue Lowbach, who many of you probably know from Connections for the Homeless. She did a presentation for Action Ridge and she used some Park Ridge data. And we personally invited, during meetings and via email, all of the commissioners and all of the council members. We didn't have great attendance, but I also followed up and sent them a recording of the session, and actually they had asked for it. So, we're trying to advocate, but we're also offering our help and assistance. As we said, affordable housing is a very complex topic, and this is what we've talked to our new planners is, we really think there has to be a lot of education that needs to happen for people to understand more about it and what we can do about it. So that's
Do you want to talk about our housing committee? Did we
well,
actually explain that?
we, our committee is working, we were working, concentrating on our, attending the meetings and, keeping everybody up to speed on what was going on. And now, while our comprehensive plan is on hiatus until our new planners kind of get up to speed. And again, our new director is Drew Awesome, who came from Highland Park. We've met with him already, and are really anxious to see, how he can help us, because again, we think Highland Park has about the gold standard for a housing plan and housing policy. And so, and we're trying to work on the advocacy toolkit that Sue Lullbach developed. And I don't know if any of you have heard about that or tried to work on that. But if you contact Sue, she can send it to you. It looks a little daunting, and we're kind of doing it our own way, but I think it's really helping us get out our thoughts and getting some language down. That's another thing, is to really develop the language to talk about affordable housing and, who it's for, why it's needed, make it personal. That's kind of what we're working on now, because we're gearing up. Our comp plan is going to come back. The housing chapter is going to be back for debate, probably, early part of next year. So, we want to be ready.
Well, ladies, one last question from me. For those who have been inspired in some way by your efforts and activities in this area, and maybe are leaving the meeting with a little bit of an itch, can you provide some words of wisdom about kind of the timeline and expectations that people should be prepared for in moving their communities through this process?
Well, I just have to say that most of the northern suburbs are way ahead of Park Ridge. So I think we are an example of moving at a turtle's pace through this process. And I'm not sure if people think that they could learn from us, that's very flattering, because we are learning a lot from other communities. I guess, it's a process. And part of the reason we are succeeding, I think, or to the extent that we are, is that we have made so many connections with so many people now. So things start to fall into place. It's almost like magic in a way. For example, we sponsored the ERA bus that came through, the voter registration bus, the purple bus, that League of Women Voters sponsored as well. And that came about because of the connection that I had with AJ Conroy, because she and I worked on ratification of the ERA in Illinois, because I knew her and she knew me. She said, do you think Action Ridge would work on sponsoring this, and with the League of Women Voters? And so we collaborated on that. So I guess if I have any advice to give, it's that it's really important to make connections and never to act always on, if somebody reaches out to you, to respond and get involved wherever you can, because you never know how you can help them or they can help you in furthering the goals that you have. Same thing with Gail Schechter and the Justice Project. Those connections are wonderful, you know, because we're all, and we get support from each other too, because we're all get discouraged sometimes, you know.
Yeah, and reaching out again to your local officials, you know, if it's a trustee or an alderman or whoever, you know, your official is, who represents your you know, call them up, send them an email, meet for coffee, you know, take a half an hour of their time and just, you know, tell them how you feel about, you know, affordable housing or about, you know, specific things that you'd like to see happen in your community. You know, nobody said no. You know, we just call people up or we send them an email and say, hey, we'd like to meet with you and you know, tell you our thoughts, and we'd like to know your thoughts. And it's a lot harder to say no when somebody's not in front of you. But if somebody's in front of you, it's you know, it's just hard to just shut them down. You know, hopefully you'll get their ear, you'll penetrate them. And if all of a sudden, you know, if an alderman or trustee has 4, 5, 6, 10 people, you know, sending them emails, calling them, saying, hey, I'd just like to have a little of your time, and expressing their opinion, that can go a long way.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much to all of you for sharing with us tonight. A lot of really great information. I just wanted to close out with a couple of items on some legislation that you may or may not be aware of and that you may want to take a look at. Some things that have recently passed and some things that are kind of in the mix. If I can get my screen to share here. I'll pull this up so that it will be on the recording. There, I have a number of resources here, but I won't go through them for those of you who might want some additional information, you know, how to get out to the government census data for housing in your own communities, things of that nature, and some really important groups in this space that have a lot going on. At the US level, I do want to point out that housing infrastructure is part of the initially proposed, you know, $3.5 trillion bill. And I believe that housing infrastructure is one of the first items that looks like it's going to be pulled out as they go through a renegotiation. There were billions of dollars in there. I want to say it was something like $300 billion in there initially. And that money across our country could go a long way toward helping to preserve and build new housing resources. And so those of you who want to keep an eye on that, I encourage you to do that, or reach out to your US representatives and voice your interest in seeing if they can't keep some of those monies in that bill as they go through the reconciliation process. You may also be aware that House Bill 2621, which is the omnibus housing bill, was signed into law this summer. It's a great bill that offers some tax incentives to people that are doing low-income housing. It also kind of firms up some of the requirements for the comprehensive plan that Kristin and Nan were referring to. And so gives you a little bit of information about, without going into a lot of detail, Housing Action Illinois has a summary, and you can take a look at it there to see what some of the things that Illinois is doing as a whole to help secure affordable housing. Also, House Bill I got a typo there, it's 2775, passed the House over the summer. It did not make it through the Illinois Senate. We're hoping very much that we can get it through the veto session upcoming. He had some meetings recently with a legislator regarding that. Sources of income legislation is the anti-discrimination bill that would make it illegal to not accept any legal source of income when you go to rent a place. So that would include everything from SSDI to housing vouchers and whatnot. It's not a particularly popular bill with some of the Senate Republicans, and so it may take a bit to get it out of the committee, but it is something that we're working on, and when it comes up, definitely something if you're interested to reach out on. And one last bill that I thought was a really important step in the right direction, 449, Housing is Recovery, created for individuals that are in obviously in recovery, either in terms of addiction or sometimes just from mental health issues that have crept up, to allow them to keep housing while they're in their recovery. It's also a very, very good bill that was passed with some help from NAMI and some others across the state of Illinois. So these are the kinds of things that the league has been promoting and working on. Not so much at the US level, because they have their own set of activities that they undertake, but these are the types of activities that we've been engaged in and continue to work on behalf of Illinois for housing. From a local effort perspective, many of you are aware, if you read the newspapers, there was some affordable housing that was looking to go in Arlington Heights that was not popular with the residents there, which ended up passing primarily because of the voice of individuals in the community putting their voices out there to say that they were in favor of it. Similarly, there was a planning commission voted down a project in Palatine that is now been represented to them, and there will be some ability for those of you who live in Palatine to get your voices out there as well. And I hope I can communicate with all of you to encourage you to do just that with the local municipality here to see if we can't get it through this time. So there's always something going on. There is a lot but little nooks and crannies within the housing arena for different legislation that comes up from time to time. If you're interested to join the Google group for housing for the league, please let me know. I will add you to that, and you can get sort of our action requests, and you can take action when you need. Otherwise, unless there are some additional questions, we've got to be getting really close. Oh, 2 minutes to the end here. So again, I do want to thank our presenters this evening for the great job and great insight. And thank you so much to all of you who signed up to attend this really important topic. Very much appreciate your attention and sticking with through the end here. Thanks a million.
Thank you, Kathy. This is Gail Vanakis. I'm the co-director for programs for the League of Women Voters of Palatine. I would like to thank our co-sponsors, the League of Women Voters from Glenview, Glencoe. I would just like to say, ladies and gentlemen who joined us today, the average for attending a Zoom meeting is at best 50%. We are at an 85% show up rate for tonight. And I think that is an indicator of the kind of civility and passion and attentiveness that democracy requires. And these women tonight and their passion towards housing is so evident in the way that you presented the story to us, to the way that you let the data reveal the story of the people behind it, to the way you work with multiple groups and how you are working constantly to bring together coalitions, to bring together consensus, to work on how do we make it good for a lot of people, and at the same time make our democracy work. This has been the best 90 minutes I will have spent all week. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to all 50 of you that attended, and go forth find out what your own communities are doing in this area. We have lots of resources for you in the chat room. This particular event is going to be available on the League of Women Voters of Palatine's YouTube. It will no doubtedly be up very shortly on the League of Women Voters for Glenview and Glencoe. If any of you have any questions, you want any more information, we also have lots of the websites available. And good evening, go forth. Just love democracy. We can do this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks for having us.